The status quo remains. Mark Rutte's colonialism is as transparent as it is offensive. Of late, race has been the cause célèbre of the Western world. Certain countries, for stunningly obvious reasons, have had to deal with the issue of tension between races. If you, for example, as a colonial power, invaded other countries and subjugated other races to your will, explaining all the while that you were entitled to do this because your race was superior to theirs, then it's as clear as day that you will be obliged to apologize and compensate for your behavior. The Western world has now succeeded in locking itself into a circle of behaviour from which it appears unable to escape. Is there an answer? I doubt it. If there was a time machine, then representatives of these countries who exploited Africa, for example, could go back in time and advise their ancestors on the folly of colonial behaviour. But would their ancestors listen? Go back in time to a wholly different world where people were convinced that Caucasians were far superior to all other races and explain to them that they were wrong and that they shouldn't be racist? No chance. Recommend that these colonializing countries renounce imperialist dogma and deliver the death knell to their plans of economic expansion and wealth? How? And don't forget that these policies of colonialism weren't isolated, but rather the mainstay of the concepts held by the British, the French, the Belgians, the Dutch, the North Americans, and others. These countries are now trying to deal with a legacy which cannot be dealt with. As far as I can see, there is no answer to this Gordian knot. Western society is potentially doomed to rip itself to pieces as a result of decisions which enabled these same Western societies to rise to the top. Interestingly, however, there is an element of hypocrisy and sanctimony which reveals that the old arrogance which drove these nations to commit to the idea of colonialism has not gone away. Whilst politicians and others in the Western world have taken the knee in an attempt to atone for the historical sins of previous generations, the behaviour of the West is still driven by a colonialist worldview. Take Mark Rutte, a Dutch politician of no particular note, a man who was forced to resign along with his entire cabinet when it was revealed that thousands of parents claiming child welfare had been labelled as fraudsters. So that's the mark of the man. Typically, however, Rutte is a firm believer in the politics of distraction. The Dutch colonised Indonesia to increase their wealth through assault, but the mission was seen as justified because it was a civilizing mission. The Indonesians were regarded as backward and primitive, and so it was only right and proper that the Dutch should steal everything they could lay their hands on. The Indonesians were raised up by the Dutch. That was how they profited. So far, Rutte has avoided apologising for Dutch history as far as colonialisation goes. He's found a way to distract attention from this modern-day cardinal sin. Attack others who are in the process of sinning against arguably a modern issue which trumps even race: gender. Hungary, along with the rest of the countries which were shut out of Europe following the West's agreement with Stalin, is far more conservative than Western Europe. And we are continually castigated for this fact. No matter that the attitudes of Central Europeans today mirror those of Western societies a few decades ago, we, conservatives, when it comes to questions of gender and sexuality, are regarded as black sheep. And so, opportunistic, wholly fallible politicians like Rutte, who need to redirect the heat which is being concentrated on them, lash out at those whom they view in the same old historical way. We, in Central Europe, are the new Africans, Indonesians and Chinese. It is our societies that the West now seeks to subjugate and re-educate. The Hungarian parliament recently passed a law which prohibits NGO activists from gaining access to schools in order to enlighten prepubescent children about such burning issues as transgender reassignment surgery. Western European liberals are up in arms about this assault on their present favourite confused minority, and so, sensing an opportunity, Rutte lashed out.
Wat wij doen is Hongarije op dit punt op de knieën krijgen.
My goal is to bring Hungary to its knee. Tell me, how is that different from what the colonialists sought? It's time to wake up and realise that modern-day Western Europeans do not regard the central and eastern parts of the continent as anything more than primitive, undeveloped peoples to be subjugated and educated to the level of Western Europeans. Rutte is a good example of all that was wrong with Western Europe historically, and a terrible example of the fact that for all the fancy talk, nothing has changed. If re-education is on the agenda, then it's Rutte who needs to go back to school. Perhaps if he knew his history, he would keep his colonialist mouth shut. Don't hold your breath waiting for that to happen.